All right, so we found our bus, and we're going to tell you the story of how we went to go pick it up, what happened, some things that we looked for, some things we didn't look for, things we didn't do.
Things we learned.
Yes, things we learned, and just some fun things that happened along the way. So first off, the bus we found was up in Tampa, which is about a 4-hour drive for us. So we got there, and the guy came out, talked to us a little bit about where he got it from, and he actually picked it up from a school district up in Delaware not too long ago, and drove it down to Florida with intentions to convert it into a food truck, take it out to New Mexico, and live out in New Mexico. And unfortunately, he came back and was like, I have too much other crap I have to get rid of first before I can even consider this. So the bus was taking up too much space, so he decided to offload it and look at that dream later. So we looked at the bus, and some of the main things that you want to look for is rust, and ours had a little bit of rust, but it wasn't too bad, and it wasn't anything too concerning, mostly surface, a few spots here and there that were a little worse, but nothing that really made a huge difference. Looking at the tires, there is a date on the tires that tells you when they were manufactured, and most of the time you don't want tires that are more than 7 years old. They just start to rot after that. And I looked at that, and some of them were good, some of them weren't, so I knew we'd have to replace some. And luckily, because our school bus was newer, it was actually in service until the end of 2021. So buying it in May of 2022, I didn't really have any major concerns about the mechanics of it, and actually the guy we bought it from had a mechanic look at it. So I wasn't really concerned about bringing a mechanic along with me. But if you're buying an older bus that's sitting for a while, definitely bring your own mechanic. Cost you a couple $100, but can definitely save you thousands of dollars in unseen repairs if you don't have a mechanic. So I was pretty confident in that. Everything seemed to work really well on the bus. All the belts were good. Underneath looked really good. Had a bunch.
Fluids were the right color.
Yeah, fluids the right color. Had a lot of really cool features, and our bus was really nice because he had actually chopped all the seats out already. Since he was going to convert it anyway, and most people that were looking at it, he said, we're going to convert it. So the seats were already out. We still had to remove some of the hardware, but that was really nice, being able to walk through the bus and be able to get an actual idea of what the space looked like. So we took it on a test drive, drove really well. Actually, the brakes on it work better than my car currently. My brakes on my car are a little funky right now, but it went really well, had some good pickup. And our bus has a little bit lower horsepower than most of the older ones. It's only 190 horsepower, but it's got a lot of low-end torque, a lot more than some of the older buses. So it kind of evens out when you're looking at buses, because most of the time you want some more horsepower in order to be able to haul the amount of stuff you're going to put in it. But since ours had a lower horsepower, it's better for consumption on fuel, but the higher torque really helps us get off the line. At stoplights, we're not winning drag races with it.
I was going to say, we're not going to be winning any big races, but it goes where it needs to go, and it doesn't go super fast. I do wish it went a little bit faster on the major highways, but we just stay in the slow lanes, and people who want to pass us, and if they don't, they can just drive behind us at 60 miles an hour.
Yeah, it drives really well, so the process, we just got back and kind of talked price with them a little bit, got them down about $1,000, which is kind of what I wanted to do. Just based on the fact that I knew it was going to cost us a little bit of money to get it registered, and then just
new tires
and just some other little repairs. So he was very willing to work with me on the price, and so we came to an agreement pretty quick on that. He was super happy to get rid of it, a little bit sad, but he was happy to be able to get rid of it so he could focus on the other things he needed to focus on. We're super excited to be able to get our bus, a newer one that is kind of on the cutting edge of skoolie life. Most people's are in the early 2000s, late 90s, and ours is the late 2000s. So that was exciting for us.
So then, after we were able to find that bus and inspect it and make sure it was what we were wanting to do, we were ready to go. We knew that we needed a place to park it for the night. We had already found a hotel for the night that we had picked before we got there. It was a beautiful spot over near Clearwater. But because it was on the beach, we weren't sure if there would be a spot in the parking lot for the bus. So I needed gas in my car, the car we had driven across the state. And We drove over to a Costco, which happened to be right off of the major road, and it was also the major road that took us basically right to our hotel. I've lived near a Costco most of my life. They always have huge parking lots. And so we were like, well, maybe we could park it overnight. And we'd done some research and seen some people that had said that Costco usually allows people to park overnight. And we went in and we found the manager and just double checking to make sure. And it turns out that Pinellas County, where our hotel was and where Clearwater is, has some sort of rule, law, mandate, I'm not entirely sure what it is, that you can't park overnight at places. And we didn't realize this until we called the Walmart nearby, and they also told us no, which is unusual because a lot of Walmarts are pretty open to letting people park overnight. That's a pretty widely known thing in the skoolie and van life community, is people park in Walmarts all the time. So that was kind of our second option, and when they said no too, we started to get a little nervous. But luckily, we called the hotel we were staying at, and they were like, well, we're not very full tonight, so you might be able to park in there, but I don't know if you'll be able to fit in the parking lot because there were a lot of sharper turns. It wasn't a huge parking lot, but luckily we were able to park in that hotel parking lot. The next morning was a little bit tough. There were a few cars that had parked along the other side of the parking lot right next to our bus and had blocked us in, essentially. So we had to get the hotel manager, person at the front desk, to call them and wake them up. Now, granted, it wasn't like 6 a.m. early. It was like 10:30. We weren't super worried about calling people, just hoping that they were actually in their room still and not out exploring. But other than that, we didn't really have many issues. So the moral of the story is call places before you just park, because you might end up getting in trouble. If we just left it overnight, we could have ended up getting booted or towed or fined or all of the above. And that would have been fun to try and figure out. But yeah, that was kind of our first night. We had a beautiful view. We could see our bus from our hotel room. They actually ended up giving us a free night upgrade. We got a bay view. We got to see the sunset on the west coast, and we could see our bus from the room, which to me was even more important because we hadn't been able to secure insurance on it, and if something had happened, we would have been footing the whole bill. It was a good first day overall, besides the small parking trouble.
Yeah, and talking about insurance, that's a big thing. Actually, our bus was already transferred to an RV title. It's actually a motorhome title, so we don't understand what that process is like. I've heard it's pretty difficult. Not difficult, but just tedious. So if you are doing this and you need to transfer your bus into a mobile home,
do your research.
Yes, a mobile home title for insurance purposes. But insurance, we actually called the next morning after we got the bus, and I got it insured. And the insurance I put on it was basically just storage. And I told them I'm going to be doing an initial 4-hour drive, about 250 miles. So they accounted that into our insurance, but it was like $500 for the entire year of insurance.
So we actually, we didn't really shop around for insurance. We might when we get to the point where we're going to actually driving it around, but we have State Farm. We've had State Farm for a long time. We're actually at my parents' house for the time being while we're finishing up my schooling and working on the school bus. And so because we were going to be at this address, we actually have both of our cars kind of lumped in with theirs as like a family plan. So we actually added the school bus / RV onto the existing family plan, and they have home and auto and all of that in their insurance as well. So I'm not sure if that accounted for some of the lower pricing, and I'm not sure if we can find better insurance out there. Once we get to that point, we might shop around. We're in Florida, so definitely look at what your insurance requirements are for your state. And if you already have a plan with insurance and you can add on your RV school bus, that might be a good option. But definitely do your research and know what requirements are needed for your specific insurance company and also your state.
Yeah, so once we got it insured in the morning, we took it to the DMV, which is where things got a little more fun. So we sat down with the guy to do our title transfer and all that stuff. The guy we bought the bus from had signed the title and let us fill in some of the info for doing that. And one thing you need to know is you can put the purchase price as a lot lower than what you got it for. I didn't feel comfortable doing that.
It's probably illegal. So
it is illegal, but on these sort of purchases, I don't think the government's really going to care, but I just didn't feel good doing it integrity-wise. So it ended up costing us about $500 extra because of just taxes. Sales tax. But the process was we handed him our title. I said, we're switching this over, and he said, where's your insurance card? So the insurance company had sent me an email with a policy number and all sorts of different information. So I showed that to him, and there was a little bit of back and forth there of like, this isn't legal, or not legal, but this won't do. You need a actual card or something. So we went back and forth a little bit, and he talked to his manager, and we got worried for a little bit there because we're all like, well, if we can't get it switched, the tag on it right now is expired, so we'd be driving across the state through tolls with an expired plate. So there was a lot of tension there for a little bit of like, okay, what if we can't get the title transferred and all that, get a plate? Will we go to jail if we cross a toll and get caught?
Will the person we bought it from go to jail because the temporary tag was in his name?
Yeah, so it was a little bit of a heated moment there and worry. But we eventually figured that out, and then he put my driver's license into the system to actually transfer the title, and he's like...
especially to see if we had any plate credits.
Yeah, plate credits. So plate credits are like, I don't know exactly what they are, but it's prepaid stuff that is in their system that they can transfer over.
So what happens with that is if you sell a car or decide not to drive anymore, or you take off insurance from your car, you're supposed to surrender your license plate if it's before the registration period runs up. And I believe, again, don't quote me on this, I could be wrong, but I believe when you return that plate, if you have a certain amount of time left on it, you get plate credits that you can put towards the next license plate that you end up getting with the registration of your car.
From there, he put my driver's license number in the system, and he's like, you don't have any cars in Florida. I was like, yeah, I have a car registered.
I've been here for 2 years.
So he figured out that in the system, it just hadn't connected, that the car and my driver's license were connected for some reason. So he figured that out, but then he pulled up the bus, and this was the fun part. He's like, it registers as stolen in our system. So he didn't tell us this the first time. He just kind of got up and went to talk to his manager, and then came back and did some more things and was like, okay, so I went to talk to my manager, and it says the bus is stolen. Not sure exactly why that is. Let me go talk to my manager again. So
that was fun.
So we're throwing this guy for a large loop, and meantime, he's like half an hour past his lunch break. So he's like working through his lunch break, and I said, well, at least you'll have a good story to go home and tell your spouse and kids, and something to laugh about tonight. And he eventually figured out that something just in their system wasn't registering correctly when they transferred it to a motorhome title. So I'm not sure exactly if they fixed anything with that or if they just flagged it in the system and put a note, whatever. But at least
we didn't steal it, and it wasn't stolen.
At least we're not driving a stolen vehicle.
I think it had to do when it came from the Delaware school district that it came from. Something in that transfer didn't quite go over right, and so I think this happened even before it became an RV. They said that happens sometimes when it's transferred from a school district to a person. Yeah. That sometimes it doesn't get transferred quite right, and so it like registers as like missing from the Delaware school district that it came from, or something like that. So they didn't seem worried about it. They told us not to worry about it, and that we're all in the clear. Yeah. But that was definitely a nerve-wracking moment, because not only at first we were like, oh, okay, maybe we'll have to stay here another night, or have to come back and get it once our insurance is more like finalized or whatever. But then when they were like, yeah, well, this bus is coming up as stolen, that was like a major Panic, because we were like, well, I don't know what to do. We paid for this bus, but if we paid someone for a stolen bus, it doesn't matter because it was stolen in the first place. It's like buying stolen artwork.
Yep. So we got all that sorted out, and towards the end, the guy had to go actually on his lunch break. So he transferred us over to someone else who took care of us, got us finished up with the process, and she was actually the one to slap the big old bill in front of us.
With the $500 of sales
So she didn't have the fun part as much of making us pay a lot of money. But she was still part of the process and had some fun stories to tell as part of that as well. So yeah, we eventually got it all figured out, went out, put the new license plate on the bus, got our Sun Pass for tolls. So the bus was all set to go.
Yeah, so I actually have family that lives up in the Tampa area, and we hadn't seen them for a couple of years. So we were like, well, we're already up here, we might as well go and see them. But my cousin is a lawyer, so he works fairly late, and he wasn't going to be available until 4 o'clock-ish. And I was already a little bit worried. So if you don't know much about the south part of the state of Florida, when you cross over near the Naples area over to the Miami area, there's a long, 100 miles or so, stretch of highway called Alligator Alley. And it is pitch black. There are no street lights except for where the beginning and the end are.
And one or two exits.
Yeah, and there's only like one or two exits, one of which is like an emergency exit only, and one of which is like a rest stop. But there's not very much, there's no gas stations along the way. It at one time was one of the most dangerous highways in the nation because there was no division. It was just 2 one-lane highway directions. And since then they've made it two lanes each way, and there's a divided highway, but it's still not the greatest place to drive, especially at night. And I already don't like driving that at night. In a car by myself. I would be by myself at this point because Tanner would be driving the bus.
It's kind of boring to drive too.
Yeah, it's just a long stretch of nothingness.
Straight nothingness, yeah.
And in the pitch black. So I was getting a little nervous about driving the bus back at dark. I wanted to try and get back at least over halfway through Alligator Alley before the sun really began to set. So I didn't want to leave Tampa much past 5. Luckily it's summer, so the sun sets a little bit later. It doesn't really get dark until 8:30, 8:45 around here. So we would be getting home around 9, 9:15, maybe a little bit later with the bus. So I was feeling pretty good about leaving at 5, so we went over to my cousin's house, we sat and we talked, and we went back to our bus. We had parked it at a Walmart, since we knew we were only going to be there for an hour, maybe 2. We didn't feel that bad about leaving the bus there for a couple of hours. We sat, talked, visited my cousin, came back about 5:30, so I was already a little bit nervous about how late we had gotten back. And we got to our bus, and there was another bus parked right next to it. 3 spots down. And that was really cool because we had never really met another skoolie person. We have friends who live in a van. We actually haven't had a chance to see it yet. I had never been into a converted school bus or van. You've seen inside a few Sprinter vans?
I've seen inside it, yeah. There was a guy down here that I met one time who had converted a Sprinter, but yeah, I've never been in a skoolie. So it was really cool. It was really cool to meet our first actual skoolie person and be able to chat to him.
We'll link them down in the description, but their Instagram handle is Crafts and Travels. But it was cool to be able to talk to them, kind of pick his brain about like what works, what didn't. They're in an older bus, a much larger bus.
Yeah, it's an MCI. It's called an MCI. It's a large coach bus. So he's got a lot of storage underneath, which is really nice.
Yeah, I was a little jealous.
Yeah.
But it was kind of cool to kind of pick his brain, talk about solar, how much he had, how much he used, the amount of water storage that he had, things that he wished he had that he didn't, things that he had that he didn't need, and kind of get an idea of the layout. Now, obviously, his bus was another, 15 feet longer than ours was?
I think
at
10
least.
Foot. Yeah, his
Plus,
was
it's a flat nose, so he's got a little bit of extra space than we do. So,
and he's got it's another foot wider too, which was really nice.
Yeah, that was really nice. But yeah, that was a really cool experience. However, we like to talk, and it was probably sitting there for like, hour and a half, 2 hours. It was already, 7 o'clock by the time we got done?
It was about 7 o'clock by the time we got finished talking to him.
And that would have put us back here in the Miami area at like 11:30 at the earliest.
Yeah, we wouldn't have started crossing Alligator Alley till it was dark.
Right, and I just wasn't feeling that.
I wasn't either, especially since I was the one driving the bus for the first time. I mean,
Right.
I've driven a bunch of large U-Hauls before, but I've never really driven them in the dark.
And the school bus is still, I mean, the length is similar, but the school bus, it's different. It's slightly different. And I was already nervous enough about him driving in, daylight suburban roads. And so, highways I wasn't as nervous about because they're usually 3 or 4 lanes, and once you're, up to speed, you just go. So, luckily, like I had mentioned earlier, we have family in the area, and they were gracious enough to allow us to stay the night. And because their bus was going to be parked next to another bus in the Walmart, I didn't feel as nervous about leaving it overnight by itself. It was only about 3 or 4 miles from where my cousin lives.
Yeah,
but
we were 10 minutes from the bus.
But it was the first night we've been leaving it by itself, and I was just a little nervous.
We're protective of our baby.
Yeah. And I'm a little bit more nervous about, I'm a little bit less of a rule breaker than most people are. I get nervous when things might not be completely allowed. Not even just, legal or not, but, allowed or not. So I was nervous about leaving it at a spot without talking to someone, or we had never really left it at a Walmart parking lot before. So I was nervous about getting a ticket or getting booted and having to deal with that the next morning. But because there was someone else that was there who had done that before, we felt pretty comfortable doing that. So we were able to stay the night in Tampa, and then we left the next morning.
Yeah, so we got up the next morning because we went back to stayed at her cousin's, went back, actually had some coffee and breakfast with the guy parked next to us, picked his brain a little bit more. We ended up leaving probably about 9:30, 10 o'clock from the Walmart, and our first fill up, we filled up at the gas station that was part of Walmart because it was actually one of the cheaper diesel gas stations.
Yeah, they actually had diesel
so,
along with the gas station, which
it
is
still sucks
crazy.
paying $5.50 a gallon, but yeah, you'll see here that it actually split my transaction into 2 transactions because it had a $125 limit. So it took us about just over $200 to fill up our tank, and we were about two-thirds down, so we only had about a third of tank. So yeah, it took almost $200, a little bit over $200 to fill 40 gallons. When a year ago would have taken 150.
Even that, though, is a lot. That was a little bit of a...
So, yeah, and at 10 miles a gallon, which is kind of what we estimated out, it's pretty brutal. So, yeah, I filled up the bus, and we set off in the rain. Driving it was pretty nice. She led the way out of Tampa, St. Pete area. And then once we got on 75, and it was an easy straight shot, and I knew where I was going, I took lead so I could set pace. Yeah, everything went really well. The bus does have cruise control in it, but I couldn't figure out how to get it to work, so I don't know if it's been disabled or it doesn't work anymore. So I'll have to look into that, see if I can fix that for the future. But the drive went really well. I hit a few big puddles and splashed some people on the way with all the rain.
And it rained pretty hard.
Yeah, it was raining pretty hard.
I don't know if people who aren't in Florida maybe don't understand what I mean by we got a lot of rain. So up north, you get this pretty misty, gray, cloudy rain. And it can be kind of dreary or depressing or just bleh if it's all day. And it can also be kind of beautiful. In Florida, we're the sunshine state, so we get sunshine most days out of the year. However, we also get rain a lot of days of the year. And yes, that does sound like an oxymoron, but no, it's not. We will get 45 minutes to an hour of pouring down rain. And when I say pouring, I mean think a whiteout blizzard, but rain. You can't see the car in front of you, and they have their lights on.
Yeah, and it's always from about 2 o'clock until about 4 o'clock, somewhere in that time. And you always just go, yeah, I just know not to go outside for an hour. It's if I have to push something back for an hour, I'm just not driving.
Because it'll go away. It'll be gone. And Alligator Alley is actually some of the worst rain I've ever experienced while driving because it's in the Everglades. So it's just wet. And so the clouds, how science, pulls the moisture out of the air, creates the clouds and dumps it in the ground. That's just how the life cycle of rain goes. But because the Everglades is so wet all the time, it's just swamp, there's always so much moisture, and I don't know what it is about Florida, but for whatever reason, the clouds in Florida can hold so much rain.
Yeah.
And then it just dumps it all at once. And luckily, we didn't hit that kind of rain where you just could not see the car in front of you, where it's literally like, you know those like waterfalls where it's like a sheet of rain? Yeah, that's what it normally is. You can get that, and it's dangerous. Luckily, we didn't hit that bad of rain, but it was still pretty heavy. Got a little nervous a little bit because I was like, I don't know how this bus handles in the rain. I mean, I know it's a heavier vehicle, so it's less likely to hydroplane.
Yeah, when you're driving a 12,000-pound vehicle, you're not too worried about hydroplaning. And yeah, so it drove well. Yeah, when we got back, parking situation, we had not found a permanent parking spot for it yet. I had done some looking around beforehand, and everything was just too expensive. So I had to come up with some different options and creation for that, but we found some temporary parking at our church office parking lot. They're in a strip mall, so we were able to just park behind there for a little bit.
This one has a little bit too much extrovertedness. I'm a little bit glad I wasn't with him. You'll figure this out probably if you follow us along. He's an extrovert. I am not. I like to talk. I will hold a conversation, but I cannot meet new people to save my life. I know that being in the bus community, I'm going to meet a lot of new people. And when I'm with him, it's not quite as bad. Especially if it's
just make the first introduction.
Oh,
and then
definitely.
He just jumps in.
Sometimes I hide behind him for a little bit too. But asking people for things, like I could never be a door-to-door salesman. Could not do it. Would not want to. It just terrifies me. Him? Not a care in the world. So, since he couldn't find any like local storage places or parks that have a parking spot that we could work at for an inexpensive an inexpensive time.
She'll be a fun cat to have in the bus. She gets zoomies a lot.
Yeah. This one, right here, with zero fears in the world, literally drove home from church on a Sunday when I wasn't feeling well and didn't go, and just stopped at random people's houses along the drive. I knocked on their doors and said, Florida's known for its lack of space. Everyone has really small lots, if they have a lot at all. But there's a little town just north of where my parents live that's horse country. It's got beautiful, beautiful lots. People have at least an acre, if not 2 or 3. So he stopped along that drive in that area of town and just walked up to people's houses and knocked on their doors and said, "Hi, my wife and I are converting a school bus to live in, and I wonder if we could park our bus for a year and work on it while it's parked here. Well, we could pay you a little bit to help to store it and offset any costs that we use of like power usage." And some people said no. Some people seemed a little more hesitant, but didn't quite outright say no, but we never really heard from them again. Finally, 2 days ago?
Yeah, so I probably knocked on 30, 40 doors, something like that. Just kind of driving up and down streets. The main thing I was looking for was people that had either vehicles already parked in their yard or had like large buildings that probably wouldn't mind having something parked beside it. And then you just had space for that. So the one I ended up actually finding, I stopped at one lady's house and knocked on her door, and she's like, "I would let you park it here, but the town that they live in is just super strict. She gets yelled at all the time for stupid little things." So she said, "Go up the street a couple houses and talk to this guy named Josh and tell him Granny sent you." So they obviously had a previous relationship that was pretty good, and so I went up the road to his place. So I knocked on his door, and super great southern hometown sort of guy. Asked him if we could park it there, and he's like, "Sure, why not? I've got another guy parking some other equipment here." He had a bunch of trailers and trucks already parked in his yard, so he's like, "Well, what's one more?" So we're gonna end up paying a little bit every month, about $100, which is fine. I was totally expecting that, to be able to just pay for some parking and some electric use, but Yeah, so we finally found our permanent parking spot. All right, hey everyone. Sorry about that. Our camera died on us at the end of that shot. I didn't realize it until we were watching the video back later. So putting the ending in here, and the finishing touches. Again, we're excited to start working on our bus and finally realize this dream. And our plan is to move in and start living out of the bus in May when Carrie graduates next year. So if you guys want to follow along with that process, please like and subscribe our videos and subscribe to our channel so we know you're following along. We'll also put our Instagram handle in the description below for you guys to follow along.